Okay. Well, I'm impressed you remember all of the staff's names. As is usual for our people in our country, we start out with using our language, and it's not so much for you guys as it is to recognise those that have got me to this point. So, kuni te mihi kia koutou ngā rangati o tēnā o ngā motu Aotearoa, mo tēnā o ngā mate hei atu rā ko koutou mai nei a tēnei te mihi kia koutou tumuake, tēnei taku mihi kia koe. Te mata te wahini toa o tēnei, ko koutou mai nei, tēnā koutou, kia ora mai tātou. Well, welcome. Hannah told me there are only 2 people here.
No, for sure.
What I've got here for you is a whole range of different things. I'm really keen to talk to you as we go through the presentation. If you want to jump in at any stage, I'm happy to stop and have a bit of a chat with you. Likewise, after we've finished, if you want to carry on some conversations, happy to do that as well. I feel a bit overdressed. I've been outside kicking a rugby ball around with a few of your students. So I don't know about the attire there, but that's as it is. Probably typical for a New Zealander to turn up and want to talk to you about the haka, and I have got some of those things in here, but for different reasons. What I want to talk to you about and why I put it first is maybe not what the usual expectation is of running the haka out, but I will show you a piece of footage and then we'll talk a little bit about that. Anybody seen this? That bald guy isn't me either. But I do know him. He's a policeman from Rotorua. Now, why I wanted to show you that and start out with that piece of footage is that some of our people at home, some of my colleagues, some of my relations see that as the commodification of culture. And they're selling our culture, selling their clothing and making money from us. And some of them are struggling with that. Me, on the other hand, I kind of like it. I like that bit of footage. I like what it looks like. It's inspiring. I can see where they're coming from around the idea of that particular tribe having some of their ancestral information being taken and used for purposes other than what it was intended for. But what I'm interested in is the philosophy behind the haka and what it represents as an opportunity to improve the health outcomes of our people. Because haka has been perpetuated amongst us for centuries, and our people love it. And funnily enough, so does mainstream New Zealanders. And funnily enough, so do a whole range of other people around the globe find the haka really intriguing and interesting and want to know what drives it and what the philosophy is for why. And once I started to investigate some of the things around that and delving into a little bit deeper, it's got me on a whole new pathway in the maybe last 5 years, I suppose, of looking at a whole new body of knowledge that we haven't seen since 1908. And the reason it's so specific in the date is that in 1908, there was legislation passed that anybody practicing in the Maori beliefs around physical activity and health from a Maori perspective could be put in jail. So it was outlawed. And so it was cut off from that period. It was some amazing information that we've been finding in the last 4 or 5 years that represents a great opportunity or a great platform for us to improve our collective health, not only as Māori, but as New Zealanders. And part of what the haka suggests is that there's another rationale, another more authentic reason to want to connect with health that we haven't even gone anywhere near for a long, long time. And that's the part that I'm finding really interesting at the moment. And when I say that, or when I start out with haka, people expect me to say how great it is and how wonderful it is. There's a whole range of other things that we don't often hear about as far as Māori health's concerned. People want to stay in that space of what's great about the haka, but there's a whole range of things that our people are suffering from that we're world leaders in, but don't want to be world leaders in. Some of the things that we're experiencing at the moment, and to be honest, this group here is the first time I've shown this particular information in probably 5 or 6 years. I don't show it anymore. I don't talk about this information to my people anymore at all. If I have to quote it in anything that I write, it goes at the back in the footnotes. We've had this stuff down our throats for the last 40 years or so, and we're done. It's been isolating us from any potential opportunity to reconnect with a way that we valued for so many decades that it's become, what's the word for it, glib, is that right? It's just rolled out everywhere. But because I'm in Ireland, maybe you don't know what we do in New Zealand, what Māori are up to. The rates are horrendous. There's a whole range of others that I haven't talked about on here that I find difficult to talk about. Infant health and child or infant death in particular. We've got the highest rates of killing our own children of any indigenous population on the planet. We literally beat our own kids to death. And yet, in our society, we say that Māori are all about family. It's a load of shit. It's crap. We're killing our own twice the amount. We're risk takers as well. It's part of our culture to step into spaces that we're probably never going to succeed, but when someone or a group says, you shouldn't do that, we're going to do more. If our doctor says to us, you've got to stop drinking, or we're going to have to amputate your leg because of diabetes, we'll drink more. It's in the very nature of what drives Māori sometimes. So we're definitely risk takers, and there's a lot of outcomes, or negative outcomes from that. I'm included in that. I've had a couple of episodes in wheelchairs. I broke my back a few years ago, managed to do this one as well. And it's not uncommon amongst our people. I know probably 8 out of 10 of my relations that have all got burns all over their bodies from being in places they shouldn't be, broken bones. When people have said you can't do that, we'll still have a go. But all that doom and gloom, there's some good things coming out of it. There's some other stuff that we're looking forward to. That mainstream process around the deficit medical model that's been used by our government is something that we've been under the yoke of for 60 years. We're trying to shift that. It hasn't been successful. Those statistics continue to grow. We're trying some new initiatives. We want to explore spaces that haven't been looked at for a long time. So we're in that process now. When I say that, I've been a trainer for 30 years. In the last 5 years, when I discovered this new body of knowledge, new old body really, it's been around for a long time, I haven't been this excited about writing, working, and talking to other groups either, I don't think. It's the strangest position to be in where things are clear to me for a change. Things tended to be grey before. They're quite black and white now. It's nice. I know exactly what my job is. I know exactly what I'm supposed to do for a change. Some people at the time, oh, it's good and bad actually. It wakes me up at night sometimes. And things are going off in my head about, oh, I see what that means. I understand, yeah. This is Milford Sound, down the South Island. It's a fjord that's in that area there. Recently I took a group into this area to retrace the steps of where Māori ancestors come through there to collect greenstone, which was a stone that was highly valued. It was harder than steel, and we used it in warfare. We used it as a what do you call it? Not so much a commodity, but it was something that we traded it or used at a really high level. Chiefs tended to have access to it. This area here was one of the places that you could get it. There were only 3, maybe 4 places that you could find it. So I recently took a group back to start looking at those places. And here's the irony about that process is that physical activity and health became incidental outcomes of seeking, regathering knowledge about these places. So we've shifted away from health completely. When I say we, I've just finished a contract for the government at home, New Zealand government, for the Ministry of Education to rewrite the health curriculum for wharekura, which are Māori schools. And there's a number of Māori schools right across just every town we have has a Māori school, kura kaupapa Māori. So there's acknowledgement that this body of knowledge is valued, not only in our communities, but the government can see that we've got an opportunity for a new level of leverage that we haven't had in a long time. So there's some shifts going on, and those shifts are going away from health and physical activity and coming back to not in areas of knowledge about where, for example, greenstone comes from, but our connection to those places, how our people moved around in those areas. We're then using that connection as a metaphor for how we can reconnect to physical activity or health. So we're shifting it away from starting at the individual back to a much wider acknowledgement and ending in the individual. Because in our society, when we stand to greet other tribes, we don't introduce ourselves until the very last part. We'll stand up and say what our mountain is, we'll say what our river is, we'll talk about all of our ancestral connections, we'll talk to all other people there. Sometimes we don't even introduce ourselves. That's quite common. And the reason for that is that if you're knowledgeable, you'll know, because we've just told you where we come from. And so that was part of the process that if you're sitting in the room, you've got to figure out the connections, and then you'll know who the person is anyway. So that's part of how we've operated for quite a long time. Now, health has been the last bastion of colonised control in our country over Māori. So we've been part of that process. In fact, we've become good at colonising ourselves, which some would say is colonisation is complete. So we don't need Europeans to do it anymore. We do it to our own. And so that process in health and physical activity is going really well. We're doing a good job of colonising ourselves, and when anyone is asked how are you going to fix them, we'll respond as Māori, well, we need a gym. We need to use some of the processes we've already been using. No one's questioning any of those ideas, but we're starting down that pathway now. I don't know whether you think colonising is a bad word or not, but we're kind of used to it. When I say it too, it's not anti-European, anti-Pākehā, anti-white person. There are no full-blooded Māori left. I'm half Irish. My grandfather's from here. And his daughter was my mother in New Zealand. He's from Armagh. It's the first time we've been to Ireland. I'm looking forward to going back through there and seeing what they look like. I don't think they'll believe I'm from there somehow, but... So we're trying to shift that focus away from the individual and back to those bodies of knowledge. And the reason for that is that's more consistent with how we operate as Māori. We've never been in that space of focusing on individual. The mainstream health model has focused just on the individual. And secondly, it says, well, these are your deficits. That hasn't been helpful for us. So we're trying to shift back to represent or show what our potential was and what we connected with. And this is the other part about Aotearoa, New Zealand, is that it was the last place on the planet to be peopled because it was so hard to get to. To cross the Pacific Ocean and survive the Pacific Ocean, especially the South Pacific, was seen as a fairly difficult task. Māori have been in New Zealand for 1,300 years-ish, but we would appear to have been able to move fairly freely throughout the Pacific. We've been, or parts of our genetic material has been found in a whole range of places. Taiwan, for example. Maybe into the bottom of South America, definitely into Tahiti, Easter Island and Rarotonga, because we speak exactly the same language. When we're in the Easter Island, we have no problem communicating. So we've been through there before. Sometimes we poke a bit of fun at the Hawaiians and say, well, you're the weak ones. You stopped halfway, we carried on. And they say to us, well, you're the dumb ones. Look how beautiful this place is, you left. So we had ongoing arguments about what that meant. This place here's a lake that's not far away. In fact, where the clouds are in the back, over the back of there is where Milford Sound is, or Pio as we call it. You come up over the range and down, and this is on the other side. And there's another storehouse of ponum or greenstone in here. Why I'm telling you this is that recently, not only did I take them back there to look at the origin of that greenstone, but I had them run up over the top. There was a 50k run in one hit. There's 2 alpine passes. When they got down, they had 125k mountain bike ride to get out over these mountains as well. So why I tell you that is, one, they were a bit surprised to hear we were going to do it, because they got told the morning of. Secondly, none of them failed, because our motivation, our drivers, our rationale for being there wasn't health or physical activity. It was to retrace the steps of where their ancestors had been. So literally every step they were taking, they may have been placing their feet in the origins of where they came from. And as a driver, there's nothing that Māori won't pursue in order to understand how come they came to be. So that part was a massive driver for them. And that was April was when we did that. I was there too, in my broken old body here. After those 2 episodes in the wheelchair, both times the GP said to me, you won't run again, that's it, it's finished. That's not the case. When we have a reason for being there that's other than health or physical activity, or what our issues might be perceived as being problems, when we shift away from that, we're capable of a whole range of things. And when I do go into those places with young Māori and they see me there, they can make that shift in their minds too, that maybe they're capable, maybe they have that potential too. And it's nice to be involved with that. How are you going so far? I did a talk yesterday in, is it Ulster? Toughest crowd I've ever dealt with. You're getting close. I don't know whether it's part of the Irish psyche or not, but they're bloody hard to read. Māori society's not that tough. They don't like you to get up and walk out. At least you smile occasionally. The ones I had yesterday, I thought they wanted to cut my head off. Now, the next step that we've been using, as I said, we looked at bodies of knowledge, we looked at ways that we could connect to those. We looked at metaphors that were represented in those environments for how we could connect to physical activity, but not for the sake of physical activity. And so over the last 2 or 3 years, what I've been doing is looking at different pieces of information that connect specifically to environments that we engage with as Māori, and looking at those and how they represent an opportunity to connect to health and physical activity, but not for the sake of physical activity or health. It's been quite challenging. But once I realised the capacity of what it represented, it's growing in momentum. I find it quite easy now. A lot of my colleagues don't yet. We have those that are specialists in health, physical activity, those that are specialists in cultural understanding, but the bringing together of those two and to synthesize that into a new form is a lot of our people are struggling with that at the moment. But that used to be one of our strengths. So I'm reintroducing that. That's my job at the moment in my mind that I think I'm supposed to do, is to get our people back connected to these places here and understand what they represent. Now, how I'm doing that is that in our society, and I would presume as health promoters, psychs and so on, that you would have the same. We have a group of people that if there's traditional, culturally based information, they're in. If that's all they need to hear. Those are ones that are practitioners of haka, are practitioners of outrigger canoeing, practitioners of modaka, which is the sticks that we use for fighting, practitioners of a whole range of pre-European types of physical activity that they're going to start no matter what. We've got another bigger group in the middle that are sitting on the fence. They're urbanised Māori. They've been isolated from this information for a long time, and they're not sure. But what we're trying to do at the moment is to build a bunch of examples that are or give us the capacity to indigenize contemporary physical activity. And this has been a bit of a hoot actually, I've had a good time with this. For example, when we looked at these areas here, I said, well, we can jump on mountain bikes and ride out. And straight away, one of my colleagues says, the hell, we can have mountain bikes in the day. How can you rationalise the use of the mountain bike? I said, well, I don't. I'm not interested in the mountain bike. I'm interested in the mountain. And this is metaphorically and literally a vehicle for the delivery of knowledge. So we can jump on a mountain bike and get to those places. And it gives us the capacity to get further in. So I'm going to use a mountain bike. Once I talk to them in those ways, so away we go. There's a whole range of other reasons that I can bring in around that as well. For example, the deity of wind is Tāwhi Mātea. When you get on a bike and you want to move forward, it's wind that you have to overcome. Now you can look at it from that perspective of aerodynamics, or we can look at it from the perspective of the personality traits of the deity of wind. And when we talk about that, in our ancestry, that deity of wind was also responsible for our lungs. So we had a whole body of knowledge about how that deity, and if we understood his characteristics in enough depth, would improve our aerobic conditioning. So we're using it as a platform for rationalising why we should engage with aerobic conditioning. And it's not for aerobic conditioning, because of the body of knowledge that surrounds that. So whether it's mountain biking, whether it's lung capacity, with a whole range of things that we can talk around Tāwhi Mātea, our people are starting to get the idea. They're starting to see the capacity. So we're having a hell of a good time with it. Now, what I've been doing, like I said, is building a whole range of contemporary models. So CrossFit, for example. I've been building CrossFit programs that use all pre-European models of physical activity. I'll give you a couple of examples of it in a minute. I'll come back to that idea before. We've got that group that are engaged no matter what. We've got the other group that are sitting on the fence, not sure. Those are the ones I'm trying to push over the fence. And we've got another group over here that are like, I don't care where it comes from, as long as it's elite. Because we want to beat everybody. Now that group there, I think, represent the best opportunity. If I can get them on board, they become my best promoters. And they're the ones that I'm paying most attention to. The ones that have the potential to pull it apart and trying to provide evidence for them. Trying to convince those people. Trying to shift them. And that's challenging again, but if I can't succeed there, I may have to give up. But I'm doing all right. A bit like talking to you chaps. So, for example, we have a body of knowledge around the origin of insects that starts with a fern. We start with the fern, and the deity of ferns is Heke. And Heke was known for his promiscuity. Big word. I struggle to do this. Promiscuity?
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds better, doesn't it? Educated person over here. So, and the reason he's associated with it is because they grow wild all through the bush in New Zealand, and there's lots of them. So we talk a little bit about that process there, but from the fern, we get to the root of the fern, which is called the aruhe. And the aruhe was something that we used for carbohydrate pre-European contact. So we would dig that up, crush it up, turn it into a flour, and sometimes make a type of a patty, or sometimes gnaw on. Tastes like crap, still tastes like crap now. Recently found it's carcinogenic, and wedge teeth out. So not that good in a whole range of ways, but it's not so much the eating part of it. I'm interested because the root system is only part of that plant. We talk about the monehu. Now the monehu are the spores that fall off of the fern in our minds, and from those monehu that land on the ground, we believe as Māori that's the origin of some insects. Not all of them. We've got another deity that is connected with insects that bite and draw blood. These are some of the ones that don't. Okay, so we've got that line that comes down to those ones. Now, one of the ones that I was particular, what I've done actually is I've looked at 10 different insects and I've built a CrossFit program out of that. And I was funded to do this by the Māori Heart Foundation in our country. So there's the drivers for these are coming out of all left field places, but they can see the potential for recruitment is going to go quite well. Now, one of the insects I've used as an example in quite a few places is the stick insect. And we call that raw tāne. We follow the line down through that, we get to raw tāne. Raw tāne in terms of CrossFit represents quite a few characteristics that we can use for core training. Can you give me a hand for a moment? You're going to have to drop that, come out here and lie down on the floor. Lie that way, stomach down, roll over there. What's your name again?
This is only his second day in Ireland, so.
Yeah, this is a good break-in for him, isn't it? Now make sure you can see him from over here. Now, you know what a plank is?
Yeah.
Or, yeah, you know a plank. Can you show us a quick plank?
Like this?
Yep, that's a plank. You know, this is one of those forms. Okay, go back down and rest. So go back down on the ground, rest. Now do that one from your elbows. So your elbows are on the ground and your knees are on the ground at the back here. Okay, so we might call this the introduction level CrossFit representation of the stick and set of raw tāne. Okay, head rest. Head rest for a bit there. Next level up from that is that we can get him up onto his hands and his feet. So same thing again, up into that press up position. Okay, so this is coming up one more level. Now the whole reason that we do this is to show that he's rigid through here. And this is what raw tāne is known for, because it looks like a stick. Head rest. Great. Now the next one up from this, what we do is we follow the characteristics of the stick and set. And what I want you to do this time is I want you to lift your right hand and your left leg off the ground, and they're going to move as though they're being manipulated by the wind. And when we studied raw tāne, the insect, this is what happens. It moves as though the wind is interacting with it, but we actually know that's Tāwhiri Mātea, the deity of wind, is interacting with Haumea Tikitiri, who's the deity of wild ferns. Now I want you to go up on this foot and that hand. So put both hands down first. So put both hands down, come up to a press up. Now take this hand and that foot away. Now what I want you to do is I want you to do that as slowly as you can, because you're being manipulated by the wind. So the wind's not going to do that just yet. Okay, so this is going to move up and down slowly, and so is this. So these are going to move up and down as though the wind is like a head rest. So we started to talk to them about the characteristics and how stick and set moves. And why we tell people this is that their genetic material has been perpetuated because of their ability to look like a stick. Yeah? So when we work with our people, we try and talk to them about moving into the space spiritually of a stick and set. We're not interested in the physical activity or the health. Now this time what I want you to try and do is, as you come, we're getting up into the Jedi level now, is you're going to lift left leg and left arm.
Yes.
If you can. So what we try and do with them is we're talking to them about, thank you very much, great job.
Nice workout.
And we're showing them the characteristics of the stick and set. No interest in the health physical activity, but we're going to get that anyway. All of those things are going to happen anyway. And we're taking them out into the bush 10 times to find the stick and set. And we're looking at different colours of the stick and set. And they're getting into that whole idea of collecting knowledge about the stick and set. And that becomes the reason. Now, as far as CrossFit's concerned, the core strength that comes from trying to hold yourself in the position of a stick and set where its hands being moved up and down is far harder than you'll ever get from a bridge hold. Would you agree?
Yes.
Especially when we're going left arm, left leg coming out. It gets tougher and tougher, and we can add more things to it. And our people are finding that as a real challenge. They love that part. The next one down there, how are we doing for time, by the way?
Keep going, keep going.
You let me. We're okay?
Yeah.
Okay, jump in whenever you've got questions too, by the way. If I see if any of you looking at your watch going, geez, is this going to be over soon? Well, I'll start to wrap it up. Okay, so the next one down that we now was, or am interested in still, is there were some questions recently about the use of dartfish and silicon coach. Now, some of you may have come across that as a video analysis software package for looking at form and a whole range of different sports. But what I was interested in was running gait or running analysis in my previous life as a trainer. I like to think I'm more enlightened now. Anyway, I looked at running gait quite a bit using silicon coach, and I had another group of people in my community wanting to know about whether they could run a marathon. And I said, well, I've looked at running games in the past. We could go down that line of using software, but what about if what we did instead was study the characteristics of Heke Tūparimona. And she procreated with Tāne, and they produced mountains. And on those mountains, we had a whole range of different offspring from those two. One of them was Tuamatua, and from Tuamatua, we've got Makatiti, Rakohore, and Rangahua. These three here are the representatives of sand, of gravel, of grindstone, of flint, and a whole range of other types of stones and surfaces. And I said to them, we could talk to you about running analysis, and we could take you out and do the video footage, but what about if I asked you to find 10 different surfaces and then report back to me how you interpreted those surfaces through your feet and had to change your gait in order to be able to be effective at moving across that surface, and show me the ancestral connections to who they were. And it shifted quite a few of them really quickly, because they said they hated running before that, but then the drive for it became an interest in looking for the surface, looking for the places where they could run on wet clay versus clay that had some stones in it, versus dry clay, versus red clay, versus yellow clay, and it went on and on and on. And eventually what we found is we, in pre-European times, had 40 different names for soil. So we went down a whole pathway looking at different soils. And none of that had anything to do with running, health, or physical activity. But it's driven them to a whole nother level of wanting to find out about those surfaces. Make sense?
So did you tell people when you were like encouraging them to do this that it was going to be beneficial for their health and physical activity, or did you leave that aspect out?
I left it out completely. To be honest, I haven't focused on that much, but we know.
Yes.
You're tough. There's two things I look for now as a health promoter. You're in health promotion? Here's my $1.50 worth of knowledge about health promotion. Laugh and sweat. That's it. And for Māori, if I get those two, they're happy. And for Māori, if I take them out into these places here, and we get an opportunity to reconnect to authentic pre-European knowledge, that's just another bonus. We're having a great time out there. We're running in these places here. 70-kilometre runs I've been doing with our people. Prior to that, they couldn't run around the block. But the drivers have shifted. The motivation has shifted into a whole other space.
And if that's sustainable, and do you have indicators that you measure?
Well, here's another interesting area about how we measure and why we measure. One of the things that's happened is one of my colleagues he's dropped around 30 kilos from engaging with us. He's in another space around nutrition as well. We've got historical information about where nutrition comes from in terms of environmental deities. Really interesting stuff. So he now won't eat anything that he doesn't have an ancestral connection to. So we have no ancestral connection to sugar or gluten, which is not that dissimilar to paleo, perhaps. But the things that he will eat, he can show in his ancestral information that his people ate that. So he will. His other interesting thing too is he's eating in various stages of decomposition. I'm just checking with my grammatical advisor here. So from rotten to raw, and trying in different ways to see what happens. Seafood he'll eat, birds from the forest he'll eat, doesn't eat beef. But the things that have been happening have been incredible. So why I'm telling you this is that the local gym said to him, damn, we should have bloody done a baseline measurement of you before you began this initiative. It would have been so cool to see. And he came to me and he said, bro, they want to know about the baseline measurement of what I looked like before. And I said, well, cool. How about we don't look at the baseline in terms of mainstream ideals of what that might represent by getting on a set of scales, but maybe your baseline measurement comes from the ancestor that your whole tribe is named after. And if it was named after that particular woman or man, what attributes did they have that the rest of the tribe in the last 600 years has continued to hold on to that name and aspire to be that? So maybe that's your baseline. So you see how we're shifting the assessment protocols into another space that we value. So that's been interesting as well. I know where you're coming from around that. We've got some semi-clinical methods that we use as Māori that we're still working on at the moment. Heart rate testing is one that we use pre-European. Urine testing as well, to see what colour we were producing at different psych testing in some capacity as well about whether we were prepared to head out and engage with the different environments. So we've been looking at that as well.
Well, it sounds like other indicators like sense of meaning, sense of value, emotional connection.
Yeah, there has to be another authentic platform that we can move forward from. And if that exists, then we'll consider the assessment. I'm in a bugger of a position because I've come through a mainstream institute and have been trained in a PhD and come out the other end. And so different organisations have me come along and speak in my country because they see the doctor in front. But ironically, when I talk to a community of Māori people, the knowledge base is out there, not here. And so they're starting to share information we haven't heard in 30, 40 years about, oh yeah, my grandmother used to make me urinate in a cup and then she'd look at it and then she'd tell me I've got to eat this or do this, and that was an assessment procedure. So kind of interesting around that. Now what was the second part of your question, or did I cover it?
No, it's just a connection with other things other than physical activity, so emotional well-being, sense of purpose, belonging.
Yeah, well I think that there's plenty of information that shows we had assessment protocol, procedures. So I think they're worthwhile looking at and trying to bring back as well. I don't think we want to just tear off because it looks nice and people are happy, but we want to know that there's some other parts of it as well. There's some of my mates, colleagues and so on, that's like, we could care less. I don't care what a number says, I'm happy. I'm having a great time. So that's, an indication enough for some of them. This particular run here, 67 k's, it goes up over a mountain pass as well. It's called the Heke. Beautiful area again to be up in. I put this up here because one of the things that we engage with as Māori, a couple actually, whenever we look at deities or environmental connections, there's only three places we'll do it through. One is upwards, in terms of constellations, because they're our most stable providers of information. They don't shift much, very occasionally. So we've used those as our oldest connections. And the information from there has been stored in certain places, and we're getting some of the access back to that. That was used for our navigation to get to Aotearoa or to New Zealand, so we're quite strong in that area there. The second level from that is connection to water. So we use water in lakes, harbours, and in the sea as our next major connection, or interpreting our world. Our third one is through land, and it comes down in that hierarchy. So upwards first, down to water, and so on. But there's connections all the way through. Here's another interesting thing that we've been looking at lately is risk assessment forms. We've been rewriting, restructuring risk assessment forms in terms of what are the personality traits of different deities that come from up here, in terms of the sun, who we call Rākura, or in clouds, who we call Tūkapua, lightning, who's Tamata Uira, rain, who's Te Ihorangi, and they all have personality traits, but those personality traits have been studied by our people to mean certain things. For example, Rakamaumau is our atua of the southerly wind. Different for you guys being the northerlies are the ones you get to know intimately, because when they turn up, they've got signs about what's coming. Well, for us, when the southerly, who's Rakamaumau, turns up, we know we've got to put our head down and get out as soon as we can. He also has an interaction with the water because he darkens them. And the atua of water is, in certain places anyway, is Tangaroa. So when Tangaroa changes colour, and Rakamaumau's coming, who's the southerly, then we know that we're at risk, so we've got to shift. So in our Māori schools, for risk assessment, we're using different forms completely, which is challenging the government. It's our government like, well, this isn't how we do it, more tough. We're doing what we're going to do. Mountain conversations, what I'm talking about here is that when I said we come from navigation down through water and into the land, mountains are the biggest deal to us because they're the oldest representations of our ancestors. And we believe they walked there, they moved there, they were mobile originally and they've settled into a spot. So they're literally our ancestors. We can talk to them. We go up to those places and try and connect. Well, the conversations I'm saying here are those ones that go on inside your head, which is that self-talk process. Now initially, from a mainstream perspective, our people are connecting with these places in that negative self-talk space of thinking, this sucks, it hurts, I can't get up the hill, I'm puffing, everybody else is fitter than me, this is hard work, so on. That kind of conversation is going on at the moment. We're shifting them into another space completely, about what the mountain has to offer is that if you go 10 times and your fitness changes a little bit, it'll move out of you and out to looking around to see what vistas are available or what the mountain has been able to provide for you in terms of knowledge base about how you can operate as a group or a family or as a person, because they can give you knowledge about how to perpetuate your genetic material if you're able to hear it. So for the first 10 times you don't, it's all about you. This hurts, I'm puffing. But eventually as you shift through that, and you have that, and you know this when the run is high when you're out and you think, gee, this is a great day, great day. But we're shifting that into saying, well, moment provided that, mountain gave you that, you didn't. So they've got knowledge that they can pass on. So that's what we're talking about with mountain conversations. And when we do go up there, we have 3 different forms that we run in. And one of them is for the physical being, where we'll run up the mountain. Another one is the psychological part that we try and connect with, and when we do that, we use a different path. On those days it might be straight line, that whatever you come across you have to deal with. If there's a river in the road, you get in the river and you go through. If there's a tree, you go up and over. And that's more about what's going on up here, to sustain or motivate yourself through that process. The third one we have is a spiritual connection with place. And when we do that, we run to ancestral sites. Now that may only take us 10 minutes, or it may take us 2 days. But that's the reason for going and not physical activity. So we can shift through those 3 representations of what an individual as a Māori person represents. Because you may have noticed at the start that I said, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. The reason we say it 3 times is I greet your physical being, I greet your psychological being, and your spiritual being. If I don't acknowledge all 3, I'm doing you a disservice. I'm not acknowledging the complete holistic person that you may represent. Is that okay? You're doing bloody well to sit still for this long. I'm a physician for a reason. I'm good for about 10 minutes and I've got to get up and walk around. So, impressive.
Is this all being delivered through the Maori schools? Or how is it being delivered? I'm just wondering about how many people are you, is it this being trialed with or piloted with, or how many people are you actually getting the opportunity to take into the mountains and to do this with?
Well, what's happening at the moment is I'm working pretty much exclusively with Māori health providers. In each district there may be up to 10 different health providers. So across the nation we might have 80 different Māori health providers. They may have 4, sometimes 10 employees that work in that space, and they've been coming to me to want to find out more about this. What's going on with this particular area. And part of the reason that's happening is the Ministry of Health is asking for the material about environmental deities to be included in any proposal that they put into the government, which is crazy for us to even think about at this stage. 1, because the government don't know what it looks like, but 2, our people don't know what it looks like yet either. So we're in a mad rush to try and inform and educate as many of our people as we can, so that when we have groups in the community coming to tribal Māori health providers and asking them, we've heard about this deity information, or environmental connections, what is it? They've at least got some knowledge. Now, that's one form of it. The other form is that, tell me if I told you this already, but did I tell you about the curriculum that we rewrote earlier? Yeah, the Māori health curriculum that I restructured and rewrote. That's going to be released in the next probably 3 or 4 months, so it's going to be in every Māori school there is. Hopefully, if we do okay, it'll end up in all mainstream schools as well, because it's relevant for mainstream New Zealanders, because it's part of their environment as well. The way that they can potentially connect to the mountain or a sea or a beach that they love. Yes, sir.
I was just wondering, is it mostly young people?
No.
Or is it also older individuals that are participating?
No, it's right across the range. That's the cool part too, that, I sent off an article that I wrote to Ian to have a bit of a look through. And in that article I've written up a new Māori health framework that we're starting to look at. We had some of our elders read through it recently. One of them rang me maybe a month ago and said, look, I've been having a lot of trouble with that thing. He said, I don't know anything about health, all physical activity or sport, but I understood what you were talking about, and that's been bugging the hell out of me. He said he couldn't figure out why, as someone who's 80 years old, who knows nothing about health and physical activity, should be able to interpret things that he thought was high level. I don't think it particularly was, but he did. And then he said he sat up in bed one night and he got it. And the reason for it is because the genealogical connections to our environment was the structure that we used to talk about in this framework. And he said once he realised that, that was why it made sense to him. So he handed it around a range of his, not colleagues, but contemporaries. And same thing's been happening. So we're getting support at the older level as well. And that's probably the area that we needed the most support from, because if we get support at our elder level, the rest is a lot easier as well.
And that would form like, obviously reinforced community then, being
Yes.
able to.
Yes, they're still our leaders. They're still those that we go to and have to get confirmation about any initiative that we use. If it doesn't roll past them, which is the equivalent of probably a, what do you call it, an ethical committee, then it doesn't fly. It's finished. So we've been getting a lot of confirmation from them. We haven't had any trouble with it yet because it's consistent with pre-European models of how we conduct ourselves. Here's another real bloody interesting thing that's coming out of it is the chap that did look at it, he's a school commissioner as well. And he would like, or said that he would like to, put it forward in tribal districts as a research methodology because of the hierarchical structure that it uses, because of its relevance to just that tribe, and because only that tribe can dispute the structure that we're using. So it's shifting away from a pan-Māori approach at a national level and making it tribally centric, which is real exciting for us as well. Because we've had a research method called kaupapa Māori research, which is a general approach that other Indigenous people globally are using and have been using for the last 15 years. Well, we believe this is the next level because it's going to specialise into what probably qualitative small N research outputs. Not that I'm much of a researcher, but you know what I'm getting at there. This word here, biopsychosocial, has been moved around a fair bit in the sector. Well, what I just spoke about there with the psychological, spiritual and physical aspects of how Māori operate, we've been doing that for centuries as well, so that kind of just fits in. You okay still? We need to start wrapping up. Here's the beach in front of my house. We've got a nice little spot.
Easy.
It's getting warm enough to swim in now too. The girls are in there. I've got 3 daughters actually around in it. They're having a great old time. When I say in front of my house, it's a little way, 5 to 10 minutes away. But we can see it and hear it at night. When he's grumpy, we can hear him crashing in and so on. Here's another cool thing that we've been doing for that CrossFit area. Tangaroa, who's the god or deity of the sea, or one of them, we talked about his personality traits, that he's pretty consistent at showing waveform. So we've been using that for interval training. So that when a wave crashes and makes a noise, your interval starts. And when it crashes again, your interval ends. And you choose a steeper or a flatter beach for a longer or a shorter interval. So he's provided a natural stopwatch. So we've been shifting everything over to culturally relevant reasons for how we train. But not for the training part of it, but more to understand how, when Tangaroa, or the deity of the sea, is happy, he presents himself in a wave. And if you learn him well enough or know him well enough, he may even let you experience his spirituality by being able to ride along the surface of it. So when surfers look for the perfect wave, we're saying, well, no, we don't believe you are. We think that what you're searching for is an experience of our deity of the sea. Same kind of outcome, but just embedded in theory, or theory's probably the wrong word, but ways that, or philosophies that Māori understand. I made that word up at the bottom. I don't know if it actually exists, but I like the look of it. And this has been interesting to me too. While I got into Ireland yesterday, and I've been looking at the way people are put together, about what some of the, pretty generalised I suppose, but the ways that Irish people seem to be made. And I wondered about this in terms of Māori society as well, about what attributes we had physically, you know, what height, what length of muscle, what aerobic capacity we had, what the demands were, and which environment ensured that happened. And I've been wondering about Irish people and the way you're put together and how come. There's a hell of a lot of freckles, I have to say. And I see some darker Irish, and there must be some influence for why that's happening. I don't see a great deal of height in Jim. I wondered about, you know, maybe with the colder environment, that being a more compact model and being able to insulate and keep your heat central might work. I know in Nepal the size of their feet for being able to move across some snowfields is useful. The Inuit people as well being quite compact and being able to keep their heat centralised. So, and what I'm getting at here is that I've been wondering about the same things for Māori people. Our colour, our size, our height, our ability to put on, there's another area that is causing trouble with the government. They're worried about our rates of obesity, which the rest of the world is too. But I've been talking about people saying, well, actually, you're meant to. You're meant to be able to put on weight quickly because that was the only reason you've survived. What's not happening is that when it comes to winter, you're still packing it on because we can get to a McDonald's now, whereas in the winter in the past you couldn't. So that imbalance is starting to happen. And I said, I don't think there's much point being angry at fat. Fat's got a job. Fat is a fuel for us to be able to ensure that we survive. And getting angry at it kind of is counterproductive. It's in our genetic material to make sure that we can do that. But the physical activity component of that is where we've been dropping off. And I don't think it's even about the attention to physical activity, it's more about the attention to this knowledge. So I'm just wondering about these things. You know, I'm putting them out there. I'm getting my head cut off by nutritionists regularly, unsurprisingly. But we've got to look at a different philosophy. We've got to wonder about that stuff. And that physiology, you know, environment's determining what you're going to have is closely connected to genetic mapping. There's a number of research papers that are coming out about athletic performance being connected to that now. Well, I wonder whether the environment does that too, and has done for quite some time. Okay, random photo. This is one of the athletes that have done. I've been his trainer for 14 years. I came here from Latvia on Monday. I was at the World Motocross Champs in Latvia, and I had another athlete there. This chap here has won 9 US titles. And I've trained him for the last 3 years exclusively in Māori processes. He didn't know that, because he's a white fella. Nor would he probably be interested just yet, but he's starting to get more familiar with the way that we do it. So every year he comes back for 3 weeks, I train him, and I set up his program for the following year, and away he goes. And it's been really successful. In fact, he's known as the fittest man in the sport. So there's evidence maybe that if we followed that a bit more and did some testing, wrapping up. Okay, we're wrapping up. Another mountain bike racing around place. Some idea. I like riding. My daughters, 2 of them anyway. And this is to wrap up them. In the area that we were living in before we're living now, 95% Māori. In that area there, there'd be 20 of the women in the little district I was living in that have got their chins tattooed. There's a number of males that have got their faces tattooed. My daughter on the left there, she's doing what's called a pukana. For the females, when they challenge someone, they use their eyes. Males stick their tongues out. You might see that in Heke. She's got green eyes. The one on the left has got blue eyes and blonde hair. When I'm walking around in different places, people ask me, whose are the girls? Mine. But people can't tell because they look that way, but they're interested in being brought up in things that we value as Māori people. I have wondered about what kind of reception I might have in the future if I come with my face tattooed. And in the next couple of years I will be, so my wife's getting worried already about whether I can still interact with groups like this. I'm hoping I can. But in short, thank you very much. You've been, I don't know how to put this, you've been quiet.
Attentive.
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 Okay, that's a euphemism, isn't it? I encourage you to ask some more questions to find out any information you do need to. I'm well aware that we're way outside the square here with what we're doing. But that's the point. The other square doesn't work.